On today's episode of Locked On Wild, the Minnesota Wild have money to spend, but I wouldn't go picking out a brand new Porsche just yet.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is going to feature a nice dive into the current state of the Minnesota Wild salary cap situation. We'll take a look at the amount of money available, the roster spots that need filling, the players in the system that could hopefully help, so we can get a little bit of an idea as to what exactly is available for free agent spending. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, and we're shuffling the schedule a tad because there's one key piece that I forgot in setting up the offseason. How much money did the Wild have to spend? Zach Parise and Ryan Suter now strictly buyouts, so I can take the names Zach Parise and Ryan Suter and light them on fire. Never have to talk about it again, thankfully. So there's $14.7 million ready and available, right? Not exactly. Now, there is money to spend, but I think it's important to just kind of, you just finished paying off a car. And you're looking at, okay, now this monthly payment is gone. So how can I spend that money? Well, before we get to that point, I think it's important to look at where things are at for the Minnesota Wild. So there are a couple of different sites that do a really good job of breaking things down from a cap position. Puckpedia is one. Spotrac is another. And I'm going to use both because I want to talk about a very interesting difference between the two, because there are two different cap numbers that we're getting based off of the current Minnesota Wild makeup of the roster, and we'll look into why exactly that is the case. But all told, the Minnesota Wild we'll start with Puckpedia. Minnesota Wild have a projected cap hit right now of $74,908,166. It is projected, and we won't know until after the season is done. We won't know until the revenue's all tallied up what the salary cap's going to be next year. But it is expected that the cap will jump from $88 million to $95.5 million is your expected salary cap for 2025-2026. So as of right now, the Minnesota Wild, according to Puckpedia, have a projected cap space of $20,591,834. That is based off of the 16 players on the active roster. Spotrac tells a different story, and this is fascinating. I'm glad that I took the time to take a peek at both of these before firing up and recording, because there are a couple of subtle differences. Now, some things to note and to mention. The Wild are getting hit with a $1.1 million overage from last year because of the long LTIR, because of the usage of long-term injured reserve and performance bonuses that were achieved by Brock Faber and Marco Rossi. Those get tacked on to this year's books. $1.1 million isn't a ton, but that's probably, that's one young player on the roster on an ELC. So that is something to keep in mind here for this season. Spot Track has the Minnesota Wild at $18,471,667 of projected cap space. That has taken into effect the overage of $1.1 million that's added onto this year's cap, reflecting the 1.66 repeating dead cap money for Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. That number is just so much more pleasing to look at than $14.7 million. And they have 17 players on the roster instead of 16, like cap friendly. So let's look at the breakdown here. The Wild have allocated right now $40.6 million to forwards, $27.6 million to defensemen, and $5.95 million to goaltenders. And the players that you have on the roster right now, your goalies, you've got Philip Gustafsson and Jesper Wallstedt. So there's your 5.95. Those two on the books. We know that Jesper will be, because his is a one-way contract. So he will be on the NHL roster next season. On defense, you got Brock Faber, Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Jake Middleton, and Zach Bogosian. So you got 5 defensemen on the roster right now for varying ages, from Faber at 23 to Bogosian and Spurgeon at 35 and 36. Interesting to note that Brock Faber slots into the lead in terms of highest salary for a defenseman, because his contract kicks in 2025, 2026. So he's getting paid $8.5 million, which definitely explains the 30+ minute nights. And they're trying to make every penny count. Totally joking, by the way. But Faber slots in as your your highest salaried defenseman at $8.5 million. You got Jared Spurgeon at $7.575, Jonas Brodin at $6, Jake Middleton at $4.35, and Zach Bogosian at $1.25 million. Now, there are some protections for a few of these players. We'll line those up later in the show. On the forward side, players that are under contract this season: Vinny Hinostroza. You've got Liam Ogren, who is, I'd be shocked if he's not on the NHL roster this year. Freddie Gaudreau, Yakov Trenyan, Ryan Hartman, Marcus Foligno, Matt Zuccarello, who mentioned, and I thought this was interesting, we talked about it yesterday with Alex. Thought it was interesting that Zuccarello mentioned that this is likely going to be his last year in the league. And at 38, still productive. But he just, I don't know. I guess I kind of figured he'd maybe go, and he maybe still will, maybe go one more year after that, kind of see how things go. But he's on the books. Joel Eriksson-Ek's on the books. Matt Boldy's on the books. Kirill Kaprizov is on the books for 9. He is your highest paid forward. And that number for 2026, 2027 is expected to go up considerably. $14, $15 million, somewhere in that range. So you have 10 forwards, you got 5 defensemen, and 2 goalies. Now, thankfully, the Wild will be able to fill a few of these spots with ELCs. That's going to be a nice, at least for this upcoming season, that's going to help out. Because, we talked about all this time leading up to the buyouts dropping from $14.7 million to $1.666667. That you were going to be able to go big fish hunting potentially for 2026, 2027, and 2025, 2026 even. There will be money to spend on some level of big fish if you want to go that route. But it's, I think it's important to just look at how some of this stuff plays out, so that you know exactly what you've got heading into the offseason. I will note Marco Rossi not included for spot track as far as players on the roster. The Wild do hold his rights. I would like to see him stay. At the very least, just go to arbitration. If you don't think you can get a long-term deal done, go to arbitration, see if you can find a middle ground. But again, and there were some comments on YouTube wondering why you'd be looking at trading a player like Marco Rossi. Well, that's a Bill Guerin question, because that's where that steam stems from. But he's not included in this. Puckpedia certainly has him as part of the roster as a restricted, and obviously the players that are unrestricted and are probably a thanks but no thanks: Marcus Johansson, Gustav Nyquist, and Justin Brazeau. Thanks for playing. Best of luck wherever you end up. John Merrill is an unrestricted free agent as well. Marc-Andre Fleury obviously retiring. So there are some spots to fill on this roster. Now, where exactly are the biggest holes that need filling? We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder for you, not sure exactly on the time of this, but Bill Guerin and John Hynes are going to give their end of season presser. I know last year it was around the lunch hour. I think it started at 11:30, noon, somewhere in there. Once it's done, going to take a second to kind of gather my thoughts, and then we'll give you a recap episode of what we learned from Bill Guerin and John Hynes in their end of season presser. I've been saying it for a while. Everydayers know this phrase by heart. I will be shocked if you don't hear Bill Guerin say the phrase, "We have to become harder to play against." Some variation of that phrase. If Bill Guerin doesn't say it, then I have clearly missed the mark. I feel like there's going to be some iteration of that. And honestly, if he goes the other direction, that's a good thing. If he goes the other direction towards, we need to find a way to, add a little more skill to this lineup, that's what you want. But I feel like the double down is going to be, we have to find a way to be more difficult to play against, which implies bigger and less mobile. We'll see. I'm not going to put too much out there until we get a chance to hear from both, and we'll have some recap and some rebuttal for what they have to say. I like to kind of think of this as the response when the president does the State of the Nation address. You usually have the a party that does the rebuttal. That's what this is. I am doing the rebuttal to whatever Guerin and Hynes have to say. about how the season went. So look forward to that coming sometime tomorrow, this afternoon. So we know that the Wild have 6 spots available on the roster. They have 17 out of 23 players, according to Spot Track. So 6 spots on the roster that are fillable. So let's start on the offense. We know this. Kirill Kaprizov, top line player, plug and play. He's going to be a top line guy, regardless of what happens next season. Matt Boldy is a top 6 player. It depends with Boldy. It depends on how the rest of this top 6 fills out. If you manage to find somebody that can come in and be an impact top line guy, then you put Boldy on line 2 to help deepen the lineup. If not, he's probably going to be on the top line once again with Kirill Kaprizov. Either way, he's going to be a top 6 guy for next season. Joel Eriksson is going to be a top 6 center, mainly because he is one of the few traditional centers that you have, true centers that you have. So he's going to be a top 6 guy. I feel like Matt Zuccarello will be, but I feel like he is trending more towards a second line, middle 6 guy. So we're penciling Zuccarello in as a second line player right now. So that's 4. If Marco Rossi is still around, that's 5, which means that you need to find a way to get an impact, bona fide top 6 player that can fill that spot. And unless there are injuries, you don't really have to worry about having to fill somebody in. Well, Marcus Foligno has played really, really well the last couple of weeks. Let's try him in a top 6 spot and see if it sticks. I'm talking about a bona fide, like, hey, this guy is going to be in this spot in the lineup. He may jump between line 1 and line 2, depending on who's hot and who's not. But that is one of the highest needs for this Minnesota Wild team heading into the offseason, is you have to find a way to meaningfully upgrade in that top 6, because then that slots everybody else in the lineup more normal, and you're not asking people to play above their skill set and above their comfort zone. So 1 top 6, potentially 2. But I feel like if Bill Guerin does go further down the Rossi trade road, that he would be looking to pull in, hopefully, somebody that's a bona fide top 6 as well. So we'll just say for the sake of it, you need 1 definite top 6 player on this roster. And the other spot from the forwards department is, let's just get some sense of order on the 4th line. The 4th line in that Vegas series, they did score 2 goals, but I mean, you're playing 7-8 minutes a night, and you look at what the Vegas Golden Knights 4th line was giving them. You're talking about 13, 14-ish minutes per night. And that's a large disparity, but it's because Bruce Cassidy had players that were, more capable of giving you something on that 4th line. And we talked about Brandon Duhaime with the Washington Capitals. He's playing 14.5 minutes a night because the Capitals know that he is capable of being out there on the ice. And we talked about it as the season started. You made the trade for Jakub Lauko because he's an actual NHLer. Well, he was hurt most of the year, so he didn't get a chance to make an impact. But you have to find, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with having to find an identity for that 4th line. What are you trying to accomplish with your spark line, your change of pace line? Are you trying to have a line that can go out there quick and can force some turnovers to start to flip, possession time in your favor? Do you have a line that is trying to be physical out there? Do you have a line that's trying to just speed around everybody? Like, it feels like the Wilds for the last few years since the Deweys both were sent off, it feels like they have just approached the fourth line as, well, you're not really a third line guy, so we're just going to play you on the fourth line, and that's really all there is to it. So that fourth line has to be figured out. You have Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, pretty solid third line guys. Hartman can fill in higher in the lineup again in a pinch, in an injury situation. But it feels like Foligno is a third line guy at this point. That's his max. That's like his ceiling. Hartman, probably same thing. Trenyon, probably no more than a fourth line guy. Gaudreau, probably a fourth plus. And Hinostroza, I think, is probably a fourth line, really puts in, high levels of effort out there on the ice. So he's a bottom six as well. So that's going to need to be filled out as well. Those will be likely some signings closer to the start of the season. And the depth, Devin Shore, I thought did okay as kind of a depth guy, but Brendan Gaunce didn't give you a ton. Ben Jones didn't really give you a ton. So that fourth line is going to need to be playable next season is the point that I'm making. Then on defense, your top four is locked in. Faber, Spurgeon, Brodin, Middleton, unless there's a major trade made in the offseason. Your top four is locked in. So who is going to be on that third pairing? Is Bogosian going to still be here? Does he end up getting moved? Third pairing, third D pairing is going to be an area that gets a look as well. And an interesting one is, I think, kind of a bridge goalie. Now, not bridge in the sense that you need to sign anybody else to try to help Jesper Wallstedt around, but more of a veteran goalie that can play at Iowa. And when Jesper or Philip Gustafsson get hurt, can come up and back up the other. That's really all I'm looking for. But I think having somebody that has done it before is important. Marc-Andre Fleury filled that role this year as the clear backup. Jesper Wallstedt does not have a ton of NHL experience under his belt. So if Philip Gustafsson gets hurt, the starts will go to Jesper, but you got to have somebody else that can kind of hang out for the ride, so to speak. So that's another spot but again, that's a signing later in the offseason. That's not a key piece to really look at here. Top six, a wing for the top six, or potentially a center. That's your big ticket item for this offseason. Now, thankfully for the Minnesota Wild, they have more than a few players that hopefully will be able to help fill some of these voids. So we will run you through some of the names that could be in contention for these spots. That is all on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Honey roasted no shells is my go-to Wonderful Pistachios variety. I keep a bag at my apartment at all times. You never know when you're going to get a little hankering for a snack, and Wonderful Pistachios is as good of a route as you can go. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We are working on a listener survey that should hopefully be done within the next week or so. Once it is up, we'll make sure to promote it throughout the course of the episodes and also have a link in the episode description. Looking forward to getting listener feedback and a whole host of different things for Locked On Wild. As I mentioned, once the season was done, really looking to kind of elevate and accelerate some things with the show. So appreciate everybody continuing to tune in and making Locked On Wild your top destination for Minnesota Wild news and notes here throughout the course of the offseason. So, spots that the Minnesota Wild may have some players that can help. And I'm going to start with the forward group because we talk about the need for a top 6 player with some skill, with some talent. The Wild have one that hopefully will be signed here as the offseason rolls along. His contract is up at the ends of the month, from what I understand. I'm, of course, talking about Danila Yurov, who is a player that we have heard quite a bit about over the last few seasons, and really an impressive prospect and somebody that I think a lot of us want to see just to see where he's at in his process, just to see if he lives up to the hype that has been bestowed upon him by Minnesota Wild fans, by prospect gurus, you name it. There's been a lot of discussion about Danila Yurov over the last few years. The expectation is that he is going to come here and is going to give it a full go to make the team for the upcoming season. He's played a lot of games in the KHL. So you're talking about a league that is pretty highly competitive and is considered one of the more like tip of the top leagues throughout the various minor league levels and levels of hockey throughout the world. Considered one of the tippy top. So he's had a lot of experience against very tough competition, which you would hope would mean that he is ready to step in and to help. Is that watching some of those combinations last year? If anybody ever wonders why I am always wearing a hat or a beanie or something, it's because it's either gray or it's gone because of watching some of these line combinations that come in and can't consistently find the back of the net. So Danila Yurov could be a player that can help you tremendously with your top 6. You slot him in maybe as a wing for line 2, or if he really lights it up, pop him on that top line and allow Matt Boldy to kind of anchor line 2. You got yourself lineup depth, baby. The possibilities are very promising and impressive for what Danila Yurov can bring to the table. So he could fill that spot, and Yurov would be playing on an entry-level contract. So that would be a roster spot filled that would get you to 18, less than $1 million a year. That'd be one more spot on the roster that would be filled. But this is important to note as well. Yurov, his rights are still owned by the KHL. His contract is up, but his rights are still owned by the KHL. So the stipulation being that, yeah, he'll come play in the NHL, but if you're just going to put him in Iowa, he's heading back to the K. He's not going to come over here for the expressed sake of going to the AHL to learn his craft. No, he'll just go back to the K. So him coming over here, he's going full bore for one of those roster spots. And if he doesn't get it, well, you're probably not going to see him. So Yurov for one of those forward spots. Defensively, we've got Zeev Buium, who has burned the first year of his ELC to get here this year, to get acclimated at the NHL level, get some games under his belt. He will be in the mix for one of those spots defensively for this upcoming season, as will David Jiricek. Think about the price that the Minnesota Wild paid for Jiricek, and he filled in when the Wild were dealing with just a rash of injuries, and he looked pretty good. So you put him in the mix for a spot next year. Again, he's on an ELC. Buium's on an ELC. These are all players that are going to count less than $1 million on your cap, which leaves you still a big chunk to be able to go for a big fish. And, you know, for some of the other forward spots, I mean, another name to keep an eye on is Riley Heidt, but he's still very young. He's still very much a young prospect. So whether he makes it to the NHL level, he'll certainly get a chance in camp. But let's be honest, he didn't look the greatest in training camp last year. Does he take a big step this year? If he does, then he's going to put himself in the mix for one of those spots. The point being, the wrap on the show here today is that, yeah, there's some money to spend. There's some money to throw at different things for this Minnesota Wild team. And if you can fill some of these spots on the roster with young players on the cheap, that gives you the opportunity to throw at more of a big name that can really give you a bona fide presence, particularly at the top of the lineup. Because I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's going to happen. It's not likely to happen, but I would be over the moon if the Wild would go and get a guy like Sam Bennett. Again, I don't think it's likely he leaves Florida, but Florida doesn't have a wealth of cap space to be able to lock him in. You go get a guy like that to pair with Joel Eriksson Ek, and the top of your lineup center-wise is a problem. So that's what I'm saying. You put yourself in position to where you can fill a bunch of these spots with ELCs. That's looking pretty nice. So we'll see how this all plays out, and we've got a lot that we will discuss as the offseason unfolds. Of course, we are going to take a look at the potential extension for Kirill Kaprizov. We'll look at options for Marco Rossi. I'll go through and kind of here's what his contract would look like. We'll discuss the options. We got plenty of time to do so, and we'll get to some draft profiles as well. So make sure to stay tuned to Locked On Wild here throughout the offseason so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Locked On Wild has you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.